Welcome to the Flute 360 podcast, where we incorporate a panoramic view of flute-related topics. I am your host, Heidi K. Begay, and this is episode 24, a discussion with Dr. Patricia Surman. Today's episode is sponsored by J&K Productions. They produce all of my episodes, from adding the intro and outro music to editing the audio and all post-production needs. Contact them for your next podcast project at jkproductions.media. Today's episode is a continuation of episode 23, where we talked with Dr. Patricia Surman about the job application process. Today, we continue that discussion. Dr. Patricia Surman is a Yamaha performing artist and Fulbright scholar. She is the assistant professor of flute and director of woodwind studies at MSU Denver. A 21st century musician, Patricia has performed as a soloist and chamber musician in North and South America, Asia, and Europe. Please help me welcome Dr. Patricia Surman. And that really bothered me. And so, body language is a huge thing. The nonverbal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up in Southern California, so I kind of grew up in the land of TV. And people that do TV all the time, they just know how to do it and they're used to it and they don't even think about the cameras anymore. But everybody else, all the rest of us, as soon as you turn on the camera, you're just going to turn into a total spaz, you know, and you're like, why am I doing this? What's happening? You know? And so I think that it's definitely worth practicing, and you should expect that in your professional career, you're going to be put on camera.
Yeah.
At some point. And it's probably going to be when you are totally unprepared or did not know it was going to happen.
Yeah.
I know, for instance, I did this outreach trip in Colombia where I played some concerts and did some teaching. And I was teaching this group of the cutest fifth graders in the world. And my Spanish is not fantastic, but it is passive. I can get by.
Sure.
But I definitely don't feel like I could communicate on camera in a TV interview, but in Spanish. But I showed up to teach one of the mornings, and they said, okay, well, you know, the TV station's going to be here because they're going to do a little segment about what you're doing. And I was like, okay, awesome. I'm going to give a TV interview in Spanish right now, you know? And so you just want to be prepared for those kind of things. Maybe remove the language obstacle, and it still would be stressful. And so you want to know what it feels like to do that. And if you're really good at, you know, giving a TV interview, you'd probably be good at giving a phone interview too.
Sure.
So those skills can come handy in the interview process as well as in your professional life.
Yeah, that's great. So in regards to the recordings that you're sending, we talked briefly about, you know, whether the job announcement specifically asks for a live video or like a full production edited, you know, recording of whatever selection. But I think the main thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the main thing that they're looking for with these recordings is, of course, you know, technique of the instrument and control of your flute playing and whatnot, but just the contrast in repertoire. The repertoire you send in, like if you send in all Bach, you know, unless you're applying for a Baroque specialist job, you know, you wouldn't want to send in all Baroque or just all classical romantic, but to have a variety of the repertoire you send in.
Yeah, I think that's pretty typical, is that you want to send in a little bit of a smorgasbord, you know?
Right.
But everything has to be things that you're really great at.
Right.
So if you feel like, oh, I need to get Baroque, I need to get romantic, and I just hate new music, but I have to put something in and I'm not that good at it, then maybe you should think about not putting that in. Put things that you sound great.
Okay.
You know?
Sure.
That allows them to know what your strengths are. And, you know, you're not required to be an expert in literally every aspect of the flute because, there are specialists in every single aspect. I think about, I love playing Baroque music, but I don't play traverso at all.
Right.
And I would definitely not put a recording of myself playing traverso on. Unless I definitely didn't want to get the job. But, I wouldn't do that.
Right.
But I know, like, if in my current job, my department chair is actually an early music specialist.
Mm.
And so he would have, I'm sure he would have loved it if I said, oh yeah, and I also play the traverso. It's, fantastic. I love playing Baroque music and I play Baroque music well on our flute. And so for my interview, I didn't even really know that he would be there. Well, I knew he would be there, but, he wasn't on the committee, but he commented on I played a Handel sonata and he commented on it and thought that it was really fantastic. And I'm sure that was helpful. It was one of those kind of just luck things. But knowing that I had a good understanding of that style was very helpful. And so you want to definitely have a variety in your recordings. And sometimes job applications are very specific and they say things like no recordings over this amount of time. Like it has to be recorded within the last 3 years or recorded within the last 2 years or whatever.
Right.
Sometimes they say they must be live, unedited. Sometimes it doesn't say anything. So if it doesn't say anything, most people are going to be sending in, very, very polished recordings.
Okay.
And probably edited.
Okay.
In fact, even if it says unedited, I bet a lot of people send in edited things anyway.
Sure.
I don't know if that makes a difference either way. Obviously, whoever wrote the job description had a certain thing in mind. And so if whatever they say, this doesn't necessarily just apply to recordings, but whatever they say, if there's some kind of sentence that seems very interesting and specific, somebody on the committee said, this is very important to me. And so you want to make sure that either you do that thing well and you reflect that in your package, or if it's not something that you do and it's not something you want to do, then don't apply for that job because it's just not the right job for you. So committees are a little finicky and they're live things. We look at this, we'll look at an application and think it seems so stagnant and like it's a fixed document, but 5 people sat down and wrote it together.
I see.
And that means they all had different desires. Sometimes those desires are in opposition. Maybe the orchestra teacher wants somebody who's going to be able to recruit a lot and have people play in the orchestra and have a teacher that's going to be very orchestra centric. Whereas the music ed person wants somebody who is going to really value the importance of education. And sometimes those two, I don't know, for instance, I'm just making up an example, but sometimes those ideas can be in opposition to each other. But your job is to figure out how could I integrate these two sort of opposing forces. Where if somebody is very performance centric and another person is very education centric, if you're a finalist, you want to get both of those people on your side, right?
Sure.
At the end of the day, you want both of those people to say, this is the person I want. And this person is the right fit for my school. Even though they have like very different needs.
I see. Yeah, no, that's really good. I hadn't even thought about, just the people sitting behind that job announcement and like forming it together and how some things could be similar in what they are looking for, but they can also be different as well.
Right. And anything could happen. If it could be, they just had a clarinet position open the year before, and they could just take the clarinet job description out and copy it word for word and just substitute the word flute. And then you show up to the interview, and by the time they've gotten through the interview process, they realize they've developed what they're really looking for out of this particular flute teacher.
Oh.
And that can be a frustrating process.
Sure.
Because it could happen that, let's say they put a job search and it says flute and music theory.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time everything's said and done, by the time they get to the finalist, things can change dramatically.
Yep.
So it could be that the job search, the job posting was posted, let's say in September or October. And by the time they have the finalists on the campus, it could be March.
Mm-hmm.
And in the meantime, they could have had other personnel changes. They could have curriculum changes. They could have people granted tenure. And all of these things can really affect what kind of teaching they need for the next year in a way that they couldn't possibly anticipate. And so things change.
Yeah.
And that can be frustrating to us when we're on the seeker side of things, because we don't know how things change and we don't know why things change.
Right.
All we know is we got invited to move forward, or we got a letter of rejection.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to say a little bit about rejection too, if you don't mind.
Oh, no, that's great. Well, yeah, great.
Yeah. So, first of all, I'd say the average job, there's going to be somewhere between 100 and 200 people applying.
Wow.
So that's a lot of people. And just thinking back to the last instrumental job search that I was on, I'd say I think we had like 150 applicants. So quite a few applicants. And out of the 150, I would say 50 were really outstanding. Maybe 25 were top notch. And maybe 10, and this was at my former university, and there might have been somewhere around the 10 number of indistinguishably amazing players.
Wow.
And teachers with amazing qualifications. So this is just how it goes. And so, of course, you want to be in that top 10, but if you imagine that let's say you're in that 10, you might not get the job,
right? Even
though you're the best player.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's something frustrating to think about.
Yeah.
That, I'm thinking about, I was on a trumpet search. I don't play the trumpet. And I was in charge, my job was to figure out who was the best player in that search. Wow. And I had to listen to those recordings and decide,
Yeah.
When I applied for my job and got my job, obviously there weren't any flutists.
Yeah, no.
Actually, there was a flutist because our music ed person was on the search. No, she wasn't on the search. Well, so there weren't any flutists. I mean, we have some people that play the flute, but they're not professional flutists in my department. But there probably aren't ever going to be people that play your instrument and evaluating what you do. And that's something to think about, like in terms of recordings. How does a trumpet player evaluate what makes the best flutist?
I see.
They're listening with a different set of ears than we are.
Okay.
And I think first and foremost, the thing that connects us all is music.
Yeah.
And so they're listening for somebody that plays music well. That means they're listening for the easiest thing I think to hear is impeccable time, rhythm and pulse. That's the easiest thing for anyone to hear. And then pitch is also, I'd say, the next thing that you hear the best. Tone quality, I wouldn't even get wrapped up in that too much, like, what does a violinist really know about what makes a great flute tone?
Sure.
You know, I mean, I bet that my violin friends can only, maybe they can only name 3 famous flute players.
Right.
So they know the sound of Galway and Paoud.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Which are 2 totally different sounds.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to think about the fact that the people that are listening to your recordings don't play your instrument. And chances are they probably don't have the kind of understanding of the repertoire that we have.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, if chances are there's probably going to be another woodwind player on, and that woodwind player has probably listened to countless juries.
True.
So they can probably name the top 5 flute jury pieces for undergrads, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so they may or may not appreciate, just depending on their personal, you know, their personality, hearing one of those pieces. But we want to somehow connect with those ears.
Oh, that's really good. Just to be thinking about who is on that search committee and who will be listening to those recordings. That's excellent advice.
Yeah, and that's tough. I mean, that's something that I think we all individually just have to come up with how we're going to deal with that. You know, what's your solution? Some people, you know, someone might say, "Oh, well, since I know this person doesn't know anything, I'm going to play, you know, these pieces that reflect my research." You know, let's say your research and your specialty area is new music, and you're an expert in microtones or whatever, and you play a piece that has all these microtones, and the committee happens to be old-fashioned. So they might not like it, but therefore, maybe that's just not the right job for you, you know? Because if they're old-fashioned and they don't like new music, you're going to if you had gotten that job, you would get in there and try to do the things that you want to do, and they might not want you to.
Right.
And they might not think that what you think is important, and you're going to be frustrated for a long time. And that doesn't sound like a fun way to live life. So I guess that we kind of somehow got back to this sense of genuineness, you know?
Right.
Be who you are. If you're into, you know, if you're like unapologetically Baroque and you're, all of your research is about Baroque French ornamentation, send in a recording of you playing your pieces that you specialize in. If you specialize in something that specific, you want to, you know, go ahead and send it in, because that's who you're going to be in the end. And they're going to find that out and they're going to know it. And maybe that's something that fits into their picture, and maybe it isn't, you know?
Right. No, that's great. So moving on to the episode 20's topic, we talked about in that episode letters of recommendation. And when I've been looking through these different job postings, it can vary between, you know, they want 3 letters or they want 5 letters. Sometimes they just want a list of references where they don't necessarily want your references to send in a letter of recommendation, but just to have their contact information, you know, easily available. So I do know that it's preferable if the letter comes directly from the recommender to the university. Right. You don't want to like be the middleman sending it, because then they know you've read it. And not that, you know, you haven't read it, you know, through personal conversations with that person, but they want to just see that it's coming directly from that advisor or mentor.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'd say, first of all, when it comes to letters of recommendation, you want to have a diverse population. If you have a job already, whether it's full-time or not, I'd say you'd want to have, you know, your major professor from your university studies, somebody from your current job, and maybe another person from your grad school, or somebody else that is going to say wonderful things about you. You want to have so that way they get a diverse look at you.
Mm-hmm.
If you send in, I think it's not ideal to have all of your recommenders from your doctoral program.
Right.
And they see that all the recommenders are from the same school. It's still like their school philosophy is going to come across, and the person reading the recommendations wants to, see a diverse thing. I think it's a little bit awkward and something just to think about. If you're, let's say your major professor, your flute professor is writing a recommendation for you, and she has 6 other students who are also applying for jobs, then that teacher might send in 6 letters of recommendation to the same job. And, as somebody reading these recommendations, it happens. First of all, there's nothing you can really do about it. But you want to make sure that your teacher is saying great things about you.
Sure.
And not saying great things about you, but if I were you, I would pick this other person because whatever, that can be really hard. I don't even really know how you would find that out.
Right.
But so good luck.
Yeah.
But well, I think the other thing is that, or the most important thing really is that, if you send out a letter, if it's a list of references or contact information, only, that when you apply for the job, you make sure to tell those people that you applied for a job.
Right. Yeah.
So
you don't want them getting a surprise message and, Heidi applied to the University of blah blah and I didn't even know about it. I mean, you don't want to throw them off guard.
You don't. And the music world is small.
Yes.
And you don't know how this person might know that person.
Right. Yeah.
No matter what you think, they might know there's probably a connection, or there could possibly be a connection. And it could be that, if they're interested in you, but they have some questions, or they're, maybe somewhere between the phone interviews and the in-person interviews, maybe they have 5 people they're really interested in, but the budget at the university tells them they're allowed to bring 2 people in or 3 people in. Then they might have to make some difficult decisions. And if your music history professor who you have on your recommendation list happens to know, somebody else from some conference and they just became friends, then, they might just call that person directly and say, hey, what's the deal with Julie Smith, and you want them to know that might happen, because we'll not, you don't want it to be a surprise. Yeah.
No. And I'd like to just kind of make mention of when you're asking these advisors and professors and mentors for the letter of recommendation in that email, that needs to be very well polished too. And just super professional, not, hey, what's up? I mean, you want to address accordingly. And, just because if you're asking them to speak on your behalf, you want to demonstrate and showcase the best you. So, not, and that seems like a minor detail. And I don't mean to nitpick, but.
Right. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And the other thing is, your recommenders need to know 2 things. They need to know what you've been up to recently, and they need to know what the job is about.
Yes.
So in this email you send out to them, that you should send out before, if it's like some of them are automated systems and they automatically send out the recommendation request. You want to send your teachers an email before. The system, a lot of times these systems just send out an automated email. And so you want to make sure that you email your teachers before you fill that out. Otherwise, they're going to say, oh, I already know because you sent out this auto email and I got it 10 minutes ago. But so you want to tell your teacher, you want to tell the recommenders what the job is about, what you've been up to, and anything else relevant that you think is going to strengthen your package,
Yes. Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, and I've noticed too that when I ask my professors or employers for a recommendation, that just adding in that job link so they know what the job is about really helps them. Because a couple of them have said, thank you so much for like just sending the information in one swoop so I don't have to dig around, because they don't have time for that.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know, when you're applying for jobs, you might get lucky and you might just get the very first job you applied for and you only had to ask your recommenders for one letter.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, but you might apply for 55. I don't know. And you might have to ask your recommenders for 55 letters.
Yeah.
And that's, of course, a lot to ask from somebody. But, when you entered the covenant of the doctoral degree, these people made a commitment to you. And so you want to respect their time as much as possible. And by giving them clearly written emails. But you also just know that this is just part of the process, and that's just how it is. So you want to pick recommenders that are going to say great things about you, but are also going to be reliable and timely.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't a critique about other people. It's just this is just the bottom line, is like, your recommenders are probably really busy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They're probably really well renowned in their fields. And that's why you went to study with them, or you were lucky enough to work with them or play under their baton. And so, they're probably going to be busy. So, try to keep in touch with them. So, they're overseas right now on a 6-week tour. So it's probably not a good time to use that recommender. So maybe instead of having a list of 5 people that you rely on to actually write letters, it would be best to have 7 people that you rely on, so that if one person can't do it at that moment, then you could just ask another person.
Yeah, that's really good.
Because it's tough. I know, I remember one of my recommenders spends a lot of time in Germany. So, when I was a finalist for a job, he was in Germany, and they called him on his cell phone. It was, I had to tell them, well, he's out of town right now. He's in Germany, so he's probably not going to answer that cell phone call. But I also sent him an email, and they managed to communicate somehow. I know I was on a committee for a position, and the person that I had to call was in Colombia, and we FaceTimed, and that worked, and it was great. And the recommender, he was super nice. He's like, oh yeah, I'm in Colombia right now. Just FaceTime me. And I was like, okay, that's great. Let me do that,
Yeah.
So it's tough, but I think just always just know that your recommenders are doing a lot for you, and be thankful and polite and kind to them, because it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But in the end of the day, they want you to get a job.
Yeah, definitely. And just even probably sending just a handwritten little thank you note probably would go a long way with them too.
I bet.
Yeah.
I think that the art of the written letter is a dying form. And I know when I go out and do concerts and master classes at other schools or out and about, when I get a little thank you card in the mail, it just makes me feel really happy.
Yeah.
And I keep all of them because I'm a thank you card hoarder. And so, I think it means a lot to get a written thank you from somebody.
Yes.
It shows that you really care. And I think that's really important, because the bottom line is, you can apply this to any part of this discussion, or any part of being a flutist or a human being, is that we are developing relationships with other people, and we want to make the world better And if you can make the world better by caring a little bit more about other people, I think that is really worth it, even if it takes a little bit of time to send that or look up their address or find a stamp,
Oh, yeah, I completely agree. We could end this discussion right there on that sentence because it was so well said.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it just, we're all in this together and we all love music and, our teachers are rooting for us. And, but like you said, to make the world that much better and kinder. And yeah, that's very sweet.
Yeah. And, I would like to say that I've really come to embrace the realization that there is a place for everybody in music. And it can feel so competitive and so daunting and so frustrating to be in the job search process. But once you really internalize and put in your heart the fact that there is a place in this world musically for you, once you really accept that, it makes the waiting process a lot easier. Because
nice.
you might wait for a while, but you might not. Who knows? And so just knowing that that there is a place for you to share your music and to be expressive and to make an impact on the world, there is a place for you, no matter what.
I love that. Because we all have different talents and abilities to offer. We're not all the same. And we shouldn't be. Not all the schools are the same either. So they're looking for that right fit, both on your end and their end.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That went full circle from the beginning of the interview. Just be yourself and be yourself.
Exactly.
And what your mom said, there's a perfect place just for you.
Right.
Great.
And so thank you so much for having me on this interview. It's been a lot of fun to talk about these things.
Yeah, I appreciate your expertise and your time, and I know how super busy you are with your new baby and everything, and so we really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Today's episode is sponsored by J&K Productions. They produce all of my episodes, from adding the intro and outro music to editing the audio and all post-production needs. Contact them for your next podcast project at jkproductions.media. Thank you for listening to the Flute 360 podcast. For more information, please visit HeidiKBegay.com. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review in the iTunes store. Let's talk about Flute.